This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring Joe Bowen, the defensive run game coordinator and linebackers coach at Miami University. Coach Bowen discusses his entrance into the profession, time as a GA at high-level FBS programs, and returning to his alma mater to coach. If you like this podcast, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new episodes each week. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Bowen.
Coach Bowen, what's going on, man? How are you?
Coach, man, I'm fantastic. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you making some time. I know this has been a long time coming, man, and I'm happy I'm able to finally get you on the horn here. And I know it's never many free minutes in a coach's life, so I appreciate you taking those few free minutes and spending it with us here at the AFCA.
No question, man. I appreciate you guys having me, man. It's awesome. Been looking forward to it for a while.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, one of my favorite questions here I've been asking over the last couple months is really like, what got you into coaching? When was that moment that you knew you wanted to be in this profession? And the amount of answers that I've gotten where it's like, man, I got around my college defensive coordinator blank, or hey, I was trying to take my career as far as I could at the professional level, and then I realized I couldn't go without football. But you have a little bit of a unique perspective as you got a super early start in this profession. So clearly your want to be in this profession probably came a little bit earlier. So just share with us, why you want to be a ball coach, when you knew you wanted to be a ball coach, and who were some of those guys that influenced that decision?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was an awesome opportunity for me to get started early on. And what made me want to become a coach, I guess, is just the impact and influence all the coaches in my life had on me growing up. Played a ton of sports growing up. I probably knew around sophomore year of high school, I knew it's what I wanted to do. My high school coach was a former college coach, and the impact and influence he made on me, but not just in football. The coaches I had growing up playing other sports, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and those relationships, being part of a team, just were things that I cherished growing up so much. My love for sports, and so I knew from an early age what I wanted to do. And obviously, with only having a couple Division II schools looking at me coming out of high school, was going to go pursue some other sports, but I knew, as just a solid high school football player, that coaching and impacting young people's lives, and as cliche as that may sound, like that's what I wanted to do because of the impact that those people had on me. My father was coaching me growing up until high school, and then all the coaches I had growing up playing multiple sports. Just giving back to the game is really why, to be honest with you, man. That's
awesome, man. Well, it's great when you have that positive experience at the high school level, and it can really, obviously just in your situation, impact what you do from a career perspective. So you decided to go to University of how do you say it? Miami University.
Miami University. Yeah.
I was going to jack that up. Miami University, and you want to coach, and so you don't mess around, man. You hop right into it. Now, the old cliche thing in the profession is the hardest job to get is the first one in this deal. So you started early as a student assistant. How did you let the coaching staff know that this is something that you were interested in, and kind of what was the whole dialogue around that?
Man, so obviously I really came to Miami because of it being the cradle of coaches. I heard a long trajectory and a long history of coaches had started their careers here. I knew it was a small enough group of 5 program where I could hopefully get involved right away in some capacity, but really had no idea. Knew they had a solid business school, could get a meaningful degree, but there really was no backup plan, man. I kind of just never second guessed it. And I came here for an orientation in the summer. I've been emailing people nonstop, but never heard back. Usually people always say coaches love free work. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. It was a new staff. When I came here on my orientation, that was in July when coaches were on vacation, the standard vacation time. But the receptionist was up there. I kind of snuck into the football building, the old football building. We have a new one now, which is state of the art. Dropped off a letter, a resume of an 18-year-old. Not much of a resume at that point in time, obviously. But just trying to get in touch with somebody, and I ended up getting the DFO's number through the receptionist there. Still thank her to this day. She's no longer working here, but she got me in touch with him. And he let me start showing up when they started fall camp. And obviously, you learn by association, try to be a sponge, doing all the little jobs known to man, from blowing a horn to switch periods between practices. That first year was really just get in where you fit in, man, and try to get involved as much as possible. And I didn't care. I just wanted to be around it, be a part of it. Obviously, the first year was probably the toughest because my class, I didn't know what it was like to be part of a college program.
Correct.
And I didn't have that priority registration like our student athletes get to pick when your classes are. So I had to be here whenever I was not in class and those types of things. But it got way easier as my college career went on because I knew how it worked and started working with the offensive side of the ball, primarily those last 3 years of being a student assistant. And, once I had that figured out, obviously you sacrifice a lot in college to do that, just like the players do. And almost maybe not as much from a physical standpoint, but from a time commitment, definitely more so.
Yeah.
Trying to work basically like a GA and learn as much as you can. And it just so happened to work out really well with Coach Martin taking over the job, going into that transition, going into my senior year of college. So I got to work with 2 different coaching staffs and I learned so much. And then, it was obviously not easy to get in the door, but the more you do, the more you show up. Like everyone says, you get asked to do more and more stuff.
Yeah.
So try to be a fly on the wall, be a sponge, and take as much from it as you can.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you a 2-part question here. You kind of answered what I was going to hit you up with because I remember being a high school football player here in Texas, and then I got the opportunity to go play collegiate ball. And the biggest eye-opening thing I think that goes for everybody that transitions from a high school to a collegiate player is like, dang, it's a lot more time commitment than what I had to do in high school. And then I remember transitioning from a collegiate player to a coach, and I was like, dang, it's a lot more time commitment than I thought. And you kind of just skip everything in the middle, and you go from high school sports to just this crazy time commitment of just being at the office all day long. Did that intimidate you at all? Obviously you kind of mentioned your schedule was maybe not as friendly as you wanted to initially as you came in there. And then the second part is, what kind of stuff were you doing to, maybe gain the confidence of the coaches to give you more, getting coffee, grabbing faxes, helping out with equipment. What kind of stuff were you doing?
I wouldn't say it necessarily intimidated me. I had to constantly explain myself to my family, my parents, my friends, my relatives, what exactly I was doing. Because I did catch the bug pretty early and I loved what I was doing. But, nobody, if you're not from a family of college coaches, nobody really understands the time demands, right? And what it really takes. So, that to me was a process of, obviously everyone's on board. My wife was with me since a high school sweetheart. So she came around really quickly, which was awesome for me. The jobs I was doing was, everything under the sun, from picking up the team snack at the end of the night for fall camp to making runs for the coaches, to laminating sheets at the print shop on campus for our game day signs and boards, breaking down the monotonous D&D long before we had, obviously the older coaches will talk about the older styles of film they had. I'm not that old, but we didn't have PFF back then. We were doing the D&D and everything by hand and looking at the play-by-plays and all that stuff. So I was doing the nitty-gritty stuff. And, I honestly, ever since I got into this, one of the main reasons I was so excited to come on here is I've been reading this stuff and watching these videos and since that time, since 12 years ago. I'm 30 years old now. I was 18 at the time. And so when you talk about trying to bloom where you're planted and really look at your job as a vital role and whatever your job is, do it to the best of your ability. I took a lot of pride in that. And again, it sounds cliche, but I really try to be the best at whatever job was given to me. And the more you show up, and I tell student assistants all the time, I take pride in developing those guys. It's the more you're around, the more you're going to get asked to do. So I just kept on showing up, man. I kept on being there, and when you're there, the more you're not going to the early days. It can be awkward because nobody knows you or trusts you or wants to ask you to do stuff, but the more you're around, the more you just speak when spoken to, then you start to get asked to do stuff. If you turn in good work and you do a good job at it, then you're going to get asked to do more and more. And then you'll be blown away with how increased your responsibilities are. That makes sense.
Absolutely, man. And I'm so happy you hit on that because I know there's a lot of coaches that listen to this are very early in their career and oftentimes might have roles, maybe not necessarily a student assistant, but just some of those early roles that you get where, man, all this is so important. All this stuff is so important. So, you walk in as a student assistant and you do get a promotion as a student, right? You now all of a sudden you're an offensive intern, and you have a defensive background. We're going to kind of hop into that here in a couple minutes. But what was the kind of the promotion deal like? If you want to call it that. I know obviously you end up with just a lot more offensive of duties, but how did you feel comfortable being a defensive guy all of a sudden just been so immersed in this offensive world?
I think it was great for me because so early on, I was never really tied into, I got to work with this position or that position. Yeah. I wanted to just learn as much as I could about the game. And that's what, the coaches around me had been telling me to do. And I had been doing some work for the DFO at the time, helping out with summer camps and gaining great experience. But he knew how much I wanted to be. I would sit in position meetings, but I wasn't doing as much work for the offensive staff, the defensive staff as I wanted to. And he kind of pushed that envelope and helped push me to the offensive coaches. And it was very well received. The GAs wanted an extra hand on deck anyways. And just being able to signal on game day and do stuff back then that student assistants were allowed to do was an awesome experience for me because I just, taking notes on every single meeting you're in. Like I tell student assistants all the time, again, like if you're here for more than 1 year, there are conversations on a yearly basis we have in staff meetings. We bring up the exact same stuff from the previous year. And if you just did a good job taking notes and you keep dates on your notes, you can bring up stuff that we're going to ask questions about that we talked about a year ago. Yeah. And I would do that type of stuff, like taking great note taking on everything I heard and look it over to make sure that I knew it and understood it and trying to learn as much as I could constantly. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that definitely made me pop up with a question here. I'm thinking about myself at 19 years old, and I was a good student. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't taking good notes in the classroom. I was, in my time, I was hanging out with my buddies, playing PS2 or whatever PlayStation model was out at the time. There comes a level of maturity that probably came with a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. Just sitting there and being very purposeful. In that time frame, listening to the dialogue in that room, taking notes, and then once again just hitting on time again. Obviously, not having the time to, necessarily have that traditional college, just student experience. And so, the sacrifices that kind of came with that and the maturity, just real quick, kind of summarize, your approach when it came to that, and maybe where you learned too that that's the way you need to approach it, especially as a young guy.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm not trying to sit here. I wasn't perfect by any means. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
we all, what I mean? I had some fun. I had tons of friends, and I equated to the situation our current players are in. I may not have played like they're at the level that they're playing, right? Yeah. I had a lot of responsibilities just like they had.
Right.
I understand the stresses and pressures a college student goes through. You get pulled in a lot of different directions, right? And you got a lot of people trying to get you to do this or do that. And you got peer pressure. And I wasn't always the best in school either, but I found something I loved and was passionate about. And I also just throughout my whole life, never wanted to let people down. So the more responsibility I was given around the building, I didn't want to let those people down and fold like a lawn chair with doing my job. You know what I mean? I wanted to do my job at a high level. So it just became early on, it was like the more invested, the more responsibility I got, the more invested I became. You know what I mean? And there are sacrifices that involve that, but if you are convicted and know it's something you want to do, or at least I tell guys all the time, if you think it's something you want to do, then go full force, go all at it. And then you got plenty of time to have a great time and have fun at a later point in time too. And it's not like you can't balance both those things out too.
Absolutely.
You can. You really can if you manage your time. It's
right.
The hardest thing, it's the one thing in life we can't get back, and it's the one thing that's hard for young people to understand. Like a freshman in college, they don't understand. They think they do have everything in front of them, honestly, but it can go quick, as you know. It goes really fast.
That's right.
I might not have understood that totally, honestly, but I did know this is what I wanted to do. I loved it, and I didn't want to let the people I was working for down. So I just kept on. Whatever they gave me to do, I tried to do it at a high level. And I was having fun, man.
Yeah.
I was really enjoying it because I was working for a smaller program. Being at a Division I school, it's great football. Don't get me wrong, I love being here. At the same time, you have lesser employees. So, as a student assistant, you can gain more responsibility and more trust and a much faster at a much faster rate than you could at maybe another school, if that makes sense.
That makes sense, man. And you talked about time going quick. And that 2011 to 2015 time, you're having so much fun, a lot of ball. I know those seasons used to go by so fast. You couldn't wait for them to show up. And once they got there, felt like it was over for you. You could really, really enjoy it a lot of times. So that your 4 years as a student assistant goes by relatively quick. And you roll right into this defensive graduate assistant opportunity there. Why was it so easy for those guys to pick you to be the defensive graduate assistant? What do you think you did to stand out? I'm sure it probably corresponds with a lot of stuff that you've already mentioned. And then what was that transition like for you? Now switching to the defensive side of the ball and getting back a little bit in your comfort zone, at least from a player perspective. Just talk a little bit about that time.
Yeah, I think that like anybody, it's making the most of your opportunity in right place, right time. So this Coach Martin gets that job going into my senior year, and not many people on his new staff know much about Miami. I had been 3 years with the program. I knew the players. I knew the school. I knew where they should go on campus tours for recruits. I knew, where we had used to done OVs, all that type of stuff. So I could be a sounding board, honestly, as a student assistant for a lot of the way things operated around here. And I tried to be as much help as I possibly could. The advantage for me was I was on the head coach. Coach Martin was the defensive guy, but he was on the offensive side of the ball when he first took over this job. And I was working for the offensive side of the ball. I was signaling. I was involved almost like a GA because I had been working for the program for 3 years. So he saw, my body of work for that one season. It turns out in that spring of that year when I was about to graduate, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. One of the GAs had left, and it was an opening on defense. He knew I played, safety in high school. I played defense. And I knew I'd probably end up on defense at some point, but I was just happy to get a Division I GA job like, thousands of people would love to have. I fell into the right place, right time, and tried to make the most of the situation. So, I started working, really before I graduated. I moved over to defense in March or April of that year. I walked to my graduation on this game field right to my left here in May of 2015 and started working. We went into summer and kept it going. And that was, an easy transition for me because I had been working on offense for all that time. But I got a defensive personality. I probably didn't know it at that time, but that's where my mindset's at. I'm a passionate guy. Definitely more fitting for me, sitting here, whatever it is, 8 years later. But I'm very grateful to him. That's why coming back to work for him a year ago was a no-brainer for me. Not to fast forward on you, but I learned so much from him in that first year on offense as well, Coach Martin, and to be able to come and coach for him on the defensive side of the ball and learn a whole other side of things at the collegiate level was just invaluable experience.
Absolutely, man. Well, you said something I kind of want to tap into a little bit, and I think this is interesting. I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer for this, but clearly as a young guy, you had a lot of experience probably balancing this. I've been on some staffs where you get a young GA or a student assistant, and they maybe come in and maybe talk a little too much. Maybe try to contribute a little too much. And then you also get some on the flip side that are just, don't say very much. And you were talking about, that new staff comes in your senior year, and you're giving them some advice, and you're a sounding board for some of these guys. And I remember in my younger days, man, the confidence to kind of come in a room and speak and be confident and have a loud voice and all that kind of stuff. What's kind of your mindset if you were giving some advice to some young guys just about how vocal to be as a young person on the staff, or if you have a position where you're not leaned on as much?
Right.
What advice would you give?
Man, I mean, it wasn't all that way. It's easy to talk about now, right?
Yeah.
I was nervous as heck when that new staff came in, right? I didn't know what, but I just kept, if I knew the answer to something that they asked or were asking directly to me, I answered it with confidence.
Right.
Thankfully, I knew a lot about the university, so I was in a good situation where I did know those answers.
Yeah.
But I didn't. If you don't know something, then don't speak up. Don't speak about things you think may be true. If you're confident and you know the answer, then speak up for sure. But your job is absolutely, like, if it's in your area or an area that you're being asked to do something, then definitely speak up. But I think that being a great coach, you got to be a great communicator. So they gave me the opportunity to become a better communicator by answering those questions. But I wasn't always the best at it. You know what I mean? I think that they helped improve that, and certainly I've been put in my place on in that situation. But I think that helped me grow when I went to all these other staffs as well, because even whenever you work for a new staff, that's something my grandpa told me a long time ago. Anytime you take a new job, man, like it takes you a couple months to find the bathroom. Right? That's just an analogy. Like you got to like figure out how everything operates before you just start like tossing out advice and opinions on things. So even when I got hired back here a year ago, like you want to make sure you get a lay of the land before you understand how every system in the organization operates before you just start tossing out opinions and advice on things, because you don't really know. So I wasn't telling them how to coach offense or defense at that time. You know what I mean? I was giving them things that they needed help on in terms of recruiting or about the campus, or what are the best spots on campus we should show recruits. Like things I knew and I was confident about that you can be helpful, but you know, that also requires having some good feel. Not to go on a tangent here, but like you got to have good people skills and good self-awareness to understand when it's time to when it's time to not speak up. Yeah. And that's something I've had to learn in my last 8 years. And I think I've gotten way better at it. It used to not be necessarily a strength. But I think as a young guy, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but like as a young guy, man, you may have all these great ideas, whether it's offensively, defensively, because you are the ones who watch a bunch of tape, right? You're the ones who break down all the film. And you may have some great ideas. What I learned is the best ideas, like they only get through and they only pass up through all the way through the coordinator or head coach if they're brought up within the right time frame. Like timing is everything when it comes to a good idea. If you bring up some idea in the wrong situation, the wrong staff meeting, it's not going to get, it may not get passed through. And like timing is critical. You got to have a good feel for the room, the mood of the room. Like that's in any business in life. I think I learned that from my dad, quite honestly.
Man, I tell you what, you said a couple of times, I'm going off on a tangent, and the crazy thing is you're not, because honestly, probably that nugget right there might have been one of the most valuable things I heard on this podcast in the last couple of years. Not that we don't get great advice from all coaches, but that's just something that we don't typically talk about on the podcast, man. That's so huge. I've seen a lot of young coaches make their career because they said the right things at the right time with the right type of confidence. And I've seen a lot of guys hurt their career because they said the wrong thing at the wrong time, and so that's huge, man. I appreciate you kind of hopping into that. Now let's kind of fast forward here. You basically spent a tremendous 6 to 7 years there at Miami, and I know you enjoyed it. Clearly you're back. It's your alma mater. Something special to you, but you did break away for a little bit and you got an opportunity. I'm kind of lump these things up together and we'll talk about them as we go through, but you spent some time at Michigan State, at Florida State, and South Carolina. You're talking about some tremendous programs, some Power 5, SEC, Big Ten, ACC programs. Why was it important for you to get away? And in the grand scheme of things, we're going to talk about you coming back here in a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, what do you think you gained from getting away from a little bit?
Man, just the opportunity to learn from so many different people, so many different coaching staffs, and like any young coach, man, we're all trying to figure it out, right? There was countless times and countless jobs outside of those ones that I ended up at where I thought I was going to get a job or didn't get the job or whatever. I mean, I got interviewed thousands of times for different things. And those experiences, it's crazy when you look back, like wouldn't trade it for anything. You never know when you take a job, like, is this the right thing for me, right move for me? Thankfully my wife and I were doing long distance for a while, and I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So being 45 minutes from home at Michigan State was a dream come true. Working for Mark D'Antonio, we played great defense for a long time there, learned a ton. We had a ton of success there. And, but it wasn't always perfect getting that job either. I didn't know if I was going to work out or if I was going to get that one. It ended up working out. But learning from some of the best coaches, and Harlan Barnett and Mike Preston and Coach D'Antonio. And then, we had a good year. So Coach Harlan Barnett brought me down to Florida State. And, being at a totally different part of the country than I've ever been at, and just being able to recruit the state of Florida, unbelievable, experience for me, being down south for those 3 years. And as a young guy getting let go and then getting retained by Coach Mike Norvell, I had a couple different roles working for Florida State, and you just learn so much and try to, like any other coach who's been let go or been retained or had uncertainty in their career, try to have joy in the journey. And at the end of the day, when you're looking at taking these jobs, you're looking at trying to get hired. Like, people want to hire people they enjoy being around and people that they know are good at their jobs. So become a master of your craft. And I tried to study from all the guys I worked with. I was lucky, man. I got to work with a lot of great people. Marvin Barnett's one of the best in the game. Mike Tressel, one of the best in the game. Chris Marvin, Florida State. Mark Snyder at Florida State. Clayton White at South Carolina. And I was going to stay at Florida State, and I got fortunate. Clayton White gave me a call to come to South Carolina. But learning some special teams under Pete Lembo, and there's too many guys to name. Obviously, my mindset, right, wrong, or indifferent, was I wanted to stay at the highest level for as long as I could. And there was countless times where I was, going to take a quote unquote lower level job to get on the grass. But I was fortunate with the guys that I worked for, particularly at the linebacker position when I started really diving into linebacker play at Michigan State, to Florida State, to South Carolina. Like, they gave me a lot of responsibility, let me run meetings, let me run individual drills, and that's something I'll forever be indebted to them for, and forever be I'll never forget that, man.
Yeah.
And I was challenged. I give a guy like Mike Norvell a ton of credit. He challenged me in that 1 year I was with him. Like something that Shane Beamer always said, like, you have a great spirit and you're comfortable, you may find growth in your situation. But if you have a great spirit and you find ways to be uncomfortable, that's when great growth happens. And making the coaches around you, maintain a great spirit and a positive mindset all the time, but find ways to be uncomfortable is one way you grow. Like, right. Don't just try to learn as many different positions as you can. Take notes on everything. Try not to have an ego. Like, even if you're a young coach who's working at a Power 5 place, it does not mean you have all the answers, right? Like, I was just trying to learn from the guys I was around and do a good job for those guys. I got some great experiences out of it. Obviously, getting to work in all three of those conferences and work for some great head coaches and great assistants. One of the best things is you see so many different styles of leadership, how they lead an organization, how they lead their staff, how they recruiting mindsets, and also multiple guys. Like, you go from working for Mark Antonio, right, who've been there and tenured for a long, long time, to seeing how a lot of guys take over for them. Got to see how Florida State was taken over by Coach Taggart and Coach Norvell. Got to see Shane Beamer in his first year at South Carolina. Yeah. So you learn what it's like to really take over a program and see it from the ground up. And my experiences with Coach Doug Martin here at Miami, when he took over Miami in that year one, really helped me. Like, watching these guys take over, at a much larger scale. Yeah. So it was awesome for me, man.
That's crazy, man. I love the detail you kind of put in that explanation over those 3 years, because you started in 2011, work in Miami till 2017, and at that point in time, man, you've had a lot of experience, doing a lot of different things, maybe at the lower tier of everything in terms of, position wise, but you saw a lot of stuff. And it sounds like in those 3 years, you might have just saw the same amount of stuff in a shorter period of time. I guess those 3 stops, not those 3 years, excuse me. But over that stop, you learned just the same amount about just so much about the business, like you said, been retained and being let go, interviewing for all these different jobs, seeing how all these different things pop up, seeing how guys do so many different things differently that you like, that you don't like. As a young coach, kind of going through that, were you looking at things for that day whenever you get to run the program yourself, basically saying, hey man, I like the way they did this. I didn't like this so much. Not necessarily it's a bad thing, but just, I like this a little bit better. What kind of notes were you taking mentally as you were going through these different places?
Absolutely, man. I think you're always going to try and take a little bit from every guy, and I try to I think I've taken a piece from everybody I've been around. There's certainly some guys that you may take more from than others. Absolutely. Just because it fits you better. Correct. What I've learned is like, particularly when you get ready for the opportunity to take jobs, or even when I came here and I had my, quote unquote, first position job at this level, like, you can't take everything, right? Yeah. And you got to pick and choose what you choose to take. But I learned that, like, all of those guys, especially the ones that have been successful, they were, through and through, they were going to be themselves. They were consistent. So there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, man. And as long as you you maintain a growth mindset in this profession, try to keep on growing and learning. And you become a great communicator, a great motivator, and a great servant to these players that we have. And you try to stay true to yourself. And don't try to be somebody you're not. You can take bits and pieces of them. Your personality has got to shine through the values the culture that you want your program to be about. And I know that the best ones that I've been around, they were themselves. And you can't fault them for that, because to me, I'm young, but I've worked for a lot of different head coaches.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a lot easier to work for the head coaches that are consistent, because you know what you're getting every day. It's much easier to show up for work and give that head coach your very, very best, because you know what their expectations are, you know what their standards are, you know what they want. I mean, as an employer, as a coach. So being yourself, really. Again, that sounds cliche, but it's the truth, man. You can't try to be somebody you're not, and that's the main takeaway. Because you can take all these quotes and slogans you get from all these different people, and all these values and core values you're going to post up in your building, but like you got to narrow it down to out of all this stuff that's great and all these nuggets I took from all these people, what fits me and my personality the best when I get that opportunity. But you bet you bet I've been taking it, man.
Absolutely, man. Well, I want to ask this question here, especially in this brief period of time early on in your career. You got the opportunity to bounce around a couple places. Obviously, I know Miami's super special to you, so we'll leave that one off the list. But every place ends up, every place you have a very different experience. I give an example. ULM. Louisiana Monroe, my first full-time Division I job, had a few promotions there, was there the longest in my coaching career. That's probably one of my more special places. But found out we were having our first kid at Davidson College. That's always going to be special to me, you know what I mean? And the amount I learned at Texas A&M Commerce was tremendous. That was my biggest leap probably in the coaching profession. Just realizing, walking in thinking I knew everything and realizing I knew nothing. It was special there. So from just a special place that you've been at, leave Miami off the list once again. Which one was more special to you? Whether it's favorite food spot, whatever, something that's not necessarily football related.
It's so tough, man, because they're all so special
right.
for different reasons. Like, and I'm taking the cheap way out of this answer, but they were all special for different reasons. Like Michigan State being so close to home, right?
Yeah.
And that'd be my first job outside of Miami, and probably, like you said, where the most growth happened.
Yeah,
where I really grew, got to see a new, different style of defense, different system, and really like my first place outside of Miami, right? But then Florida State was the place I was at the longest.
Yeah,
and probably had the most relationships because I worked for two different staffs there. All the support staff you work with on two different staffs, and it's Florida State is Florida State. It speaks for itself, right? So that's a unique spot for me. And then South Carolina was the first place that me and my wife really got to live together after we got married together in Columbia. So they all have unique perspective, and I'm grateful for them all. So it's hard for me to pick that, man. I know
you're good. I don't want to put you on the spot too hard there, but you kind of made my point anyways. That like all these places, there's stops when it's all said and done, but they all hold these special places, whether it's your growth.
Man, you got to find joy in the journey. Like I said, in every spot, you can look back and be like, "Dang, it happened for a reason," and it always does.
That's right.
There was certainly uncertainty, man. This path is never perfect for anybody. There's uncertainty all the time, and you know what you sign up for, but if you can find, joy in the journey, and you're going to always look back and realize like how blessed and grateful you were for each of those moments and situations, because you learned so much.
Right. Now, as you were kind of bouncing through these jobs, they're off the field. Excuse me, not off the field, but they're a graduate assistant. And I know you were an analyst for a bit there with Florida State. And it's changed so much since my last year coaching in terms of some of those positions. They used to didn't pay that much at all, and I know some of these positions do pay quite a bit. But just talk a little bit about the sacrifice, whether it's financially or whether it's with your relationship with your wife. Some of the decisions you had to really kind of go through and say, is this a good job for me to take? This is what I have to sacrifice in order to take it.
I went back and forth on that quite a bit, and this is I got a unique perspective on it because I was willing to make that sacrifice. Thankfully, my wife and I, by the time I had gotten to Florida State, we got engaged. And she had a great job, still does, working remotely. We don't have any kids yet.
Yeah.
But I knew for me to get to where I wanted to go, that I had to show people that I could coach. My path was not playing this game at a high level. So I wanted to be on the grass for as much as I could. I didn't want to be known as the guy who was just stuck behind the computer who could break them down and bring you great ideas or have great thoughts. Like I wanted to be known as a great communicator, a great motivator, a great technician, a guy who could coach. So I took a voluntary pay cut at Florida State to go from being an analyst to being back to being a GA because I wanted to be, I just couldn't fathom myself standing there at practice and not being able to coach. And that was when they were cracking down on some of the things analysts could and couldn't do.
Right.
And I felt some type of obligation to the guy that brought me down there to where I wanted to be more of a help. I wanted to help the team win. So like, it wasn't certainly just a selfish decision of, I want to show these guys I can coach. It was like, how can I make most of an impact in the role that I'm in? Well, I know I can make more of an impact if I'm helping these players every day at practice, or at least I thought I could, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to make the biggest impact at all these places. And you know how those rules go with analysts and GAs and all that stuff. And I knew that there would never be, that's the reason I took the job at South Carolina, to be back on the field in coaching, not go back into an analyst role. Like my last year where I could take a GA role, it was 7 years out. And because I did that, Pete Lembo gave me a job coaching on every single special teams unit at South Carolina. And I was coaching the right guard, right tackle, on punt, and I'm forever grateful for him for giving me those opportunities. Like got invaluable special teams on the field coaching experience, and it was, I'm forever grateful for it because I did that. So it was definitely sacrificed from a financial standpoint for sure, and the benefit of being at those places, in the SEC or at Florida State or South Carolina is like, you get fed pretty well in the building, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you get, there's nutrition is on point, but my wife had a good job at the time. I was willing to make a sacrifice. I was working so much that I was giving up, doing a whole bunch of travel and stuff. So it didn't really matter to me at the time, but you start getting married and having kids and all those things, it obviously becomes more of an issue. But I knew based on that everyone's situation is different. Like you said at the beginning of this, like everyone has their own path.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know your strengths and your weaknesses. Well, when you look at your own weaknesses, well, mine were I didn't play this game at a high level. So the more staffs, the more people I can get around and show that I can coach and make an impact on the field, then it's going to help my career in the long run.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I thought, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's why I did it. And that's why I chose to try and take all these GA jobs and stay on the field for as long as I possibly could at the highest level, man.
Absolutely, man. That's a tremendous answer there. So let's bring this thing full circle here. 2022, you get the opportunity to come back. So I do want to dive into that, exactly kind of how that went down. But just real quick, in the short summary, how would you describe Coach Bowen that walked out of Miami in 2016, 2017 to the one that showed up in 2022? What was the differences in that, all the experience you were able to garner over the years? What do you feel like changed over those couple of years?
Man, I learned so much. So I think that the kid coming out of here, man, obviously thought I knew a lot more than I did. There's no question about it. Like a lot of young coaches, I was obviously passionate, hungry, but had so much to learn that I didn't even know. You don't even realize just about managing people and situations. And the crazy thing about coaching is like there's so many different situations that come up every single day with players, amongst staff members, and coworkers, players. And the game and the recruiting has changed, and just learning so much about how to manage those situations with players and have patience. I think that I was much more emotional back then. I'm still a passionate guy now, but it was definitely riding that young emotional roller coaster. Like now I'm much more poised and composed. I still am passionate, but on game day I'm much more composed and calm, and definitely I enjoy the little victories a whole lot more. Realized how hard it is to win at any level, at any place, at any time. So just celebrating all wins. That's rule number one. Learned that from Clayton White at South Carolina. Shout out to him. Like celebrate all wins, man. Don't ever get mad twice is something he always said too. Like, I've just grown up, man.
Yeah.
That's the simplest way to put it. Like, I was definitely, those experiences helped me become a much better recruiter in the way that I relate to people from all different backgrounds and situations, because you're exposed to so many different parts of the country and people from all over the world. Like that in itself, the relationships and the ties, you see things from such a different lens. I would say back then when I left Miami, whatever it was, 2016, I saw life through a straw, and then coming back, hopefully I see it through a scope now, right?
Yeah.
Got a much better perspective. I would hope. I'm still trying to grow every day, man.
Yeah.
I am not a finished product by any means.
Yeah. Yeah, and it never will be. That's the great thing about this profession,
No
as
doubt.
much as it changes. Now, just real quick, and I'm realizing I've been enjoying this so much. We're about 10 minutes over what I typically keep these podcasts
I apologize, man. I know I can talk.
No, man, this is great stuff, man. I keep the questions coming in too. Just talk to us about that phone call from Coach Martin, or whatever that process was like for you to return back to Miami University. What the position opening up to you signing on the dotted line to be back there?
Yeah, man. I was at the bowl site for South Carolina. We were at the Duke's Males Bowl, and I was actually hanging out with some of the other coaches and got a call from him. But I had obviously, like most jobs, you hear about it maybe a couple days before, whatever. And I had been pushing hard, kind of threw a lot of my eggs at it. I've been hoping one day I'd get a chance to come back and work with Coach Martin. Always stayed in touch. Like, the cool thing about Coach Martin is, he always stayed in touch with me as a former GA. He's a great guy to work for. He really built this program up, took it over when they were 0-12 and 0-16 really, and won the MAC in 2019. So I'd always been keeping tabs on him and what he had done moving into this new fantastic building we got. And he gave me a call, and I threw all my eggs at it. Everybody I knew was reaching out to him, and I think I probably annoyed him a little bit, but I wanted to go all at it.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about Coach Martin, like, he already probably would tell you he knew those things about me, so he didn't really need, like, I was probably overdoing it, to be honest with you, but I knew it was a great job that I had a chance to hopefully get. I had a couple people pushing for me, and I wanted him to know, like, the impact that I'd hopefully made on a lot of people in these last 7 years. You know what I mean? Like, that I'm not the same Joe Bowen that left you. You know what I mean? And really, like, prove it to him that I am ready for you to hire me back. He still had me Zoom interview. Got back from the bowl site, and I had a Zoom interview because I never really worked with linebackers with him, right? That's really most of what I had done since I left. I was the defensive back GA for him when I was here, and just had a great interview process on Zoom. Got the call the day after I interviewed, and I got the job, and obviously it was an incredible moment for me, my wife, we were going to get the opportunity to come back here to Oxford, and it's awesome, man. It's been a great, obviously, year back here, and wouldn't trade it for anything, man. It's just, you never know. And I obviously didn't know. He called me at the bowl site. I interviewed, 9-10 days later. I don't know the timetable 100% because it's all a blur, but it ended up hiring me and came back here, man. So it's great how it panned out. I know that.
Yeah, that's right, man. Well, that's awesome, man. Anytime you get the opportunity to, come full circle and come back to your alma mater, that's definitely special. I know how much, growing up in that location as a coach, be able to come back and once again, not show your final product, but show a little bit more polished product of yourself in that full-time role, man. That's awesome. Before I let you go here, man, you mentioned you're a long-time listener to the podcast, all that kind of stuff. Why is the AFCA important to you?
Man, the AFCA is important to me because I'm only where I'm at in this profession because of the coaches I've been able to work with, work around, work for, learn from. High school coaches to college coaches at any level, to working camps. I've been over the last 12 years. If somebody calls me to do a clinic or a podcast or anything, man, it takes a heck of a lot for me to say no to. I want to give back and because I think even when you do them, you can learn from other people. I'm learning from you today. Like, you're constantly trying to learn and give back to the profession because we do it for the kids. We do it for these young student athletes. We get to get to work with every single day, and it's the greatest game in the world, man. Like, to come full circle again, and not to go on a tangent with another story, but I left here, obviously, when I came back, my starting linebacker last year was a seventh-year senior who was 25 years old. When I was at GA here, he was a walk-on freshman. So I get this job, come back here, he's a seventh-year senior.
Oh, man.
And my first full-time job, I'm coaching a 25-year-old. He ended up third in the country in tackles this year, played half the year with a broken wrist and had a club on. So my point is, like, it's about the players, right?
Yeah.
You never know how full circle it can come. And you work with a kid when he's 18 and he's a walk-on, you come back, he's 25, he's a grown man,
yeah,
and you get to coach him. You know,
awesome.
It's like all these crazy stories you hear about. Everyone's got stories like that, man.
Yeah.
And you hear like that, those type of stories give you chills. Like, I love hearing people tell their story. And like you said earlier, everyone has their own path. There's no cookie cutter way or set path in this profession. It's not like, oh, you get this finance degree, you go work on Wall Street, you do this, you start your own business. No, it don't work like that, man. It's keep giving back to the game and doing it for these players and doing it for them, man. And never lose sight of that. As crazy as you know, the recruiting landscape changes and all that, you know, you still want to be in it for the right reasons, man. And you want to know that you're making a difference in people's lives every single day, man. And if you do that, you're leading a good life at the end of the day.
That's huge, man. Well, hey, before I let you go here, I want to give you the opportunity to share your social media just so Coach can keep up with your journey. Hit you up if they got any questions or anything like that.
Absolutely, man. My Twitter is @Coach_Joe Bowen. @Coach_Joe Bowen. JOEBOWEN. Whenever, get in touch with me whenever, man. I try to reply to everybody that reaches out, man. And I love talking ball, man. Anytime, any place, anywhere.
Absolutely, man. Well, we'll make sure to link that in the show notes. And best of luck to you as we kind of roll through the summer, into recruiting here, summer, and then right into a busy season. And then look forward to seeing you in Nashville. Okay.
Awesome, man. I appreciate the opportunity, Coach. Means a lot.
Thanks so much for hopping on. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to AFCApodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter @InsideTheHeadset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at AFCA.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit AFCAinsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter @CoachMarioPrice. And remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.